Portman of Ohio is here to talk about it all. And we should also note he was also budget director under President George W. Bush. So you are an expert, sir, in these matters. Thanks for being with us. First, straight away, isn't this a fool's errand? We're talking about the 2011 spending gap. Isn't it a fool's errand bringing these cuts in when you know Democrats won't accept them?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, this is happening because last year the Democrats did not put forward a budget, so there is no budget, as you say. Therefore, the government is running on what's called a continuing resolution, which is last year's spending. And what Republicans are saying in the House, and will soon be saying in the Senate, when it comes over to the Senate in a couple of weeks, is that we need to get the spending under control. This type of spending, the annually appropriated spending for domestic programs, has gone up about 24% in the last 2 years. That doesn't include, by the way, the stimulus funding or other funding, which would take it up to about an 80% increase. So as American families have tightened their belts, as businesses have learned how to do more with less, the federal government has grown a lot. And so the question is, do you want to go back to that pre-crisis level of about 2008, or do you want to lock in all that higher spending? And that's really the debate here.
Both sides agree that you need to make cuts. The issue is, where are the cuts? And right now, the White House is now threatening a veto of this measure if it cuts too deeply. And Republicans, many in the House, are dug in. So the bottom line is you could face a government shutdown. Is that what we're walking up to here?
Well, I hope not. I don't think that's going to happen because, as you say, I hope both sides realize we do need to make reductions in spending. I will say I like your optimism on that because the president's budget just came out for 2012 and beyond. That starts in October of this year, and it does not have cuts. It has a freeze in spending. Some programs are increased, like high-speed rail. Others are reduced. But I would hope the administration is getting the message, not just from the November elections, but from the experts here in Washington, the Congressional Budget Office, the people who are following this at the Office of Management and Budget, which is that under the president's own budget, the debt doubles in the next 10 years. We have the largest deficit in the history of our country, the largest debt we've ever had, and it's affecting our economy today and certainly mortgaging the future for our kids and grandkids. So I hope you're right that everybody is focused on how do you not just have a freeze, but actually reduce some of the spending.
In fairness, the president's budget also would see some serious cuts in specific agencies, but it doesn't make an overall cut in amounts of spending.
That's true. It's a freeze. In this area, it's a freeze, and about 12% of the spending. In other areas, it goes up. For
one moment, let's stay on the stopgap measure that's being debated right now in the House. Speaker of the House, John Boehner, said something today. He said that if 200,000 new federal employees lost their jobs, quote, so be it. Do you share his view?
Well, no, what I think he was saying is that we need to right-size the government, and what happens in terms of federal employment needs to follow whatever is the right thing to do for our country's future. So in the last few years, we've lost, I don't know, about 3 million private sector jobs, and yet federal government jobs have increased. So I think he makes an interesting point there that we do need to figure out, because of the fiscal crisis that's at our doorstep now, how to do more with less in the federal government, just as the private sector has had to do. And you know, the question is, what's that going to lead to in terms of federal employment? Nobody knows yet. The president actually has proposed, as you know, freezing salaries of federal employees. So I think both sides realize, I hope, as you said earlier, we've got to get this spending under control. It's about our economy today. It's about the future for our kids and grandkids. And that's going to have to include
at the future here. Let's look at the future.
Everything.
President Obama has said that, you know, he does think that it's possible to essentially cut a deal and rein in the budget. Here's a little bit of President Obama from his press conference.
Let's face it, you guys are pretty impatient. If something doesn't happen today, then the assumption is it's just not going to happen. Right?
Now he's talking about the press, that we want to see cuts.
I know, but you know, I think you all are representing the American people, which is, yeah, we are impatient. All of us are, as taxpayers and citizens.
But sir, let me ask you, you have been on the other side of this equation. You have been on the other side of this equation. You were a budget director. Don't you know that they have to be careful for political reasons?
Well, look, the president just issued his budget, which is a 10-year vision for where the country ought to go. He had an opportunity there, Jessica, to lay out a reasonable way to get spending under control, to deal with not just this annual spending we talked about, which is 12% of the budget, but the bigger picture, which is the mandatory spending, the entitlement programs. He chose not to do it. He took a pass. As they said in the Washington Post editorial today, he ducked the tough issues. It's time for us to get serious. And so for the president to say you all are impatient, Yeah, people are impatient for him to lay out a vision that makes sense. And if he doesn't do that, it's very difficult
Sir,
for us to
your
move
administration, the Bush administration, racked up $1.3 trillion in deficits. So how can you slam the president for something that your administration never took on?
Well, I was the budget director 4 years ago, and on this very week, 4 years ago, I proposed a budget which was balanced over 5 years. And that was because, frankly, at that time period, we had a relatively low deficit. It was $161 billion, so 1/10 of today's deficit. And we had pretty good revenues coming in because the economy was doing well. The tax relief had worked to grow the economy. This was before the financial crisis. But, you know, I know this is tough, and it's difficult to be in a position of presenting a budget because you're never going to please everybody. But the fact remains, the president has been very eloquent about talking about the problem, and yet his solutions don't meet the challenge. And
well,
we need that. We need to have a vision of how to move forward on a bipartisan basis to solve this problem. I hope we'll see that in the coming weeks.
We'll look forward to seeing how it unfolds. Thank you so much, Senator
Thanks, Jessica.
Rob
Thanks for having me on.
Right. She lost to Harry Reid in the Nevada Senate race, but could she have her sights set on the White House? We'll tell you what Sharon Angle is up to. And a giant planet